In this training, I'm going to walk you through how Body Reset works. If you feel like you know enough about nutrition and training that you should be getting results, but you feel like things just aren't moving, you feel like you're dabbling in all these different areas, you're listening to the podcast, you're watching the YouTube videos, you're reading all the information you can about this current stage of life, but you just can't get your body shifting. You're not as strong as you want to be, you're not as fit, you're not as energetic, you're not as sharp, you're not as lean. Something's just off and you know that you're leaving results on the table. I want to walk you through our approach, our method around the integration of those three elements, really the whole fueling side, the movement side, and the recovery elements, or through what we look at as digestive, physical, and psychological, to make sure that you can really think of what parts are you ticking off that you are doing really well, and what are the missing links. Because from what we've found with a lot of busy and motivated people that we work with, they're far from lazy, but they usually just don't have that integration of the three linked together. They're working out really hard, but they're not quite fueling properly, or they're nailing the nutrition and they've just got no muscle to really utilize it, or they're burning the candle from both ends. They're eating well, they're training all the time, but they just don't have the recovery to actually bounce back. And I'm going to walk you through a bit more of a roadmap of how we approach this from more of a simple overview and hopefully give you some clarity on the next steps that you can take for you. All right, so what I'm going to walk you through is a little example, step by step, of this little body reset. Ultimately, we want to help you get stronger, we want to help you get healthier, and we want to, in most cases, get you to a point that you're leaner or happy with your overall body composition. So I'm going to start over here with I just can't eat less. If I just keep eating less and less, like there's nothing left to restrict, right? I'm down to 2 almonds and a lettuce leaf, and I can't really eat less than that, right? That's something that we at least see a lot where people are starving themselves, or they're always on a diet, and then maybe there's a bit of a rebound, but for the most part, they're restricting themselves. So if we look at this small little category first and we highlight the emphasis, I'm going to go through all three of these, so don't worry about skipping ahead. But if we look at, I just can't eat enough, what do we do? Well, the big emphasis overall is we really need to start to think about fueling to change, fueling to get the change we're after, rather than trying to starve that change. Because if we're in that point, we're in our 40s, 50s, or 60s, and we're seeing that the body's not responding like it used to, regardless of how little we eat or how much we train, we can't just keep eating less, because our immune system, our energetic system, our metabolism, all sorts of hormonal profiles change, and it becomes really tough to sustain. All right. So if you're just trying to diet and you don't worry about how you feel in the next 2 weeks for a photo shoot, then amazing. But if we're trying to really look at fueling to create something long-term, create something that lasts. So 3 areas that we tend to look at here are going to be specific protein targets, right? How do we make sure that we're getting enough protein in order to build enough of a base? Now, this comes in at a couple different levels. The first one is that we are able to actually increase our thermic effect from food. What I mean by that is by increasing our percentage of protein that we're eating, we're actually in a position that we burn more. So it doesn't just come from exercising harder. In most cases, eating more can actually help you burn more, which is kind of a cool concept. It's simply through an increase in protein. Also knowing that we have a increased anabolic threshold as we age, which means we need to eat more protein in order to just maintain where we currently are. And most people completely miss that. And it's usually because that digestive system needs a bit of work. So to skip forward a little bit here, focusing on fixing that gut is not a probiotic or another kombucha. It's usually an emphasis towards how can we make sure that we're actually extracting the nutrients, assimilating the food that we're actually eating. A lot of that comes down to more the habits of breath, of slowing down around meals, of chewing food, of not having all our water when we're eating, that can make a huge difference to the quality of those meals. And then lastly is this concept of metabolic flexibility, right? It's not about going low carb or keto or having lots of carbs. It's about finding the timing aspect of where they're most relevant for you in the day. So if you're a builder or a farmer, that's going to be different than if you're behind a desk. If you're really active throughout the day or you don't move at all, how you eat and where you place carbohydrates, especially in your day, can have a huge difference to your energy based on blood sugars, based on your ability to use that fuel. All right. So just within nutrition section, there's a lot we can look at, but it's not just a myopic restriction of food. It's the more specificity around protein, fueling, timing, and of course, gut health. The second part or problem that we tend to see a lot of people run into is that they're constantly feeling, fatigued and flabby no matter how much exercise they do, and a lot of hunger coming through. And this usually comes back to a lot of circuit classes. It comes back to a lot of running. It comes back to like forcing the body to change, or maybe it's just exercise they've always done, but it's no longer working like it always did. So the emphasis that we put here is towards muscle over simply more movement, right? I'd much rather you do a slow and controlled leg contraction than jumping up and down to a song. Getting you to a point that we're actually, one, focusing on activating muscles. So there's real emphasis towards, if you think that you find weight training boring, what this I immediately think of here is all you're thinking about is counting from 1 to 10 with a dumbbell going up and down. Of course it's boring. If we can bring that signal, that awareness to what your body's already telling you, it's going to feel almost meditative, like yoga, like Pilates, like a good stretching session where you're listening to the feedback that that body is giving you. So activating muscles gives you a great place to start. The second one here is a focus on heart rate zone training. If you've got that sort of really annoying 5 to 7 kilos that you just can't lose, it usually comes back to being more specific around the heart rate to which you're training in. The reason I say in that sort of final 5 to 7 kilos is because if you've got 20 kilos to lose, you can kind of get away with just working out in a form of more movement. Most people that have got 20 kilos to lose typically aren't training, 5+ days a week, whereas people that have got that 5 to 7 kilos to lose a week are typically already quite active, but they lack the specificity of heart rate zone training. So that can be very helpful. And as you get closer and closer to your goal body shape, that becomes more and more important. And then the last one here is going to be the progressive training phases. So rather than just putting a random collection of exercises together, and unfortunately this is still common if you're working with a personal trainer, because if they've got lots of clients, taking that time to program training is really, really time consuming. And a lot of people simply haven't been trained here. This is something I spent a decade on, trying to make sure that every training phase that each of our clients did over 6 months, 12 months, 24 months was perfectly interlaced into the previous phase to maximize the focus. It's not just about putting more weight on the bar or doing more volume. There are so many variables like our rest times, the lactic acid accumulation, the time under tension, all of these things that we can progress and structure in a way of maximizing that 30 minutes in the gym. And frankly, if you're spending more than 40 minutes in the gym and not getting the benefit, more than 3-4 days a week, then it's not about doing more, it's about doing better. And then finally, we get to the final section, which is that recovery piece, right? The classic tired but wide. I'm tired during the day, but I really still don't sleep very well. And there's this whole space that I need to improve of I'm waking up throughout the night. I really would love to just get back to a full night's sleep. Or from all this training I'm doing, I'm just noticing I'm not recovering as well. I'm sore for 3+ days. All right. So look, I look at recovery through more of an active lens rather than just telling you to rest more. And in most cases, this becomes the classic stress is not a level, it's a threshold. Meaning, if we improve your resilience to stress, you can tackle stress better. It's not about telling you to stress less. And I find that very important and very worthwhile highlighting if you're a busy professional, executive, business owner, running around after 3 teenagers, whatever is in your life that is stressful, it's about improving your resilience to it. And this is where you become bulletproof when you get it properly. So there are a couple of components of this wind down routine that are worth highlighting first, which are simply the emphasis towards the sleep habit formula. It's usually not about initially biohacking your way to a better quality sleep. It's simply about giving yourself an adequate amount of time to actually get 8 hours of sleep. And the amount of busy people we work with where they're not in bed until 11 and then they have to be up at 5 a.m. So the ability to actually get 8 hours of sleep is simply hindered from the start. If we can focus on getting quality, not quantity out of our day, what component of our schedule and structure of our day becomes, maybe building a no muscle, giving ourselves some margin, some buffer room to focus on the most important stuff rather than the most quantity of stuff can be super helpful in either delegation or prioritization of habits and being able to fit us back into our day rather than having 3 different calendars. The second part, as I mentioned, was not about a passive approach to recovery, but what are the components of my day that make a huge difference to how I feel on a day-to-day basis. This links so much into insulin, into mood, into fat loss through simple things like adding a 10-minute walk in at lunch. If you feel like you need a 2 p.m. coffee, you don't need another coffee. You need to go for a walk. If you're sitting down in your day and you're having these dips and dives of mood, of course, nutrition and how you fuel yourself comes into this, but a huge portion of this is active recovery. If we could add in a couple of lunges in between your back-to-back meetings, or we could go for a 10-minute walk without devices, the ability to recenter, pause, breathe makes a huge difference to how you're showing up. And then lastly, I've already mentioned this a couple times through the gut health and the active recovery, but giving you specific breathing techniques to focus on how to get alert and stay sharp, something like a box breathing, where we're getting better at using carbon dioxide and improving our tolerance or our extraction of oxygen utilization, or being able to calm that nervous system down down at the end of the day, and being very mindful of that continual cue back to proper nasal breathing, the extraction and use of nitric oxide instead of mouth breathing and feeling fatigued all the time, and how much of an impact that has to our mental clarity and our overall structure as well. So look, overall, there is a ton in this space, but there are three key categories that we are looking at. We're looking at our way that we move to highlight an improvement of specificity and quality. We're doing the same thing with nutrition, fuel to change, not starve to change. And then lastly, improve our resilience factor of a proper wind down, a proper recovery capacity to get ourselves back on track. So really, this is the ultimate trifecta of how we address health in a different way. If you feel like you're in a space where you're dabbling and you're kind of doing a little bit of everything, but you're not truly creating that integration together, I promise you it'll make a difference when we actually lock and load, create that season of focus where you're doing all three together, and your body will start to change. You'll start to see that awareness of working with your body, it being a companion and coming along for the ride, rather than constantly feeling like you're fighting it. You're not listening to the signals. You're not seeing the changes you want to make, or, work's crazy and life's busy and the body is just not where it needs to be. So look, I bring this up to show the integration, the highlight of how we look at body reset through a different lens, and truly a reset of those three factors. Because if you want that body to shift, it's not about dropping calories and increasing, the weights on the dumbbells. It's about really bringing in the identification to which part of that you might be missing and then building from there. So I hope it's helpful. I'd love to know which one of those you are wanting to work on next. And hopefully it gives you a little bit of awareness. It gives you a little bit of intent behind getting rid of the dabbling, creating that integration of all three, and selecting that next run. For us and our clients, what we would look at here is identify, 2 habits that you're not currently doing, and then build on this. So this might be a 6-month structure, but at the end of the day, we are looking at it through all three together rather than just one focus by itself. When you do that properly, the body starts to work.